Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
This entire military is one cohesive, dedicated force. And the threats to our nations, they don't sleep. They're watching our every move. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. They may be watching this right now. Our military should not be mistaken for a cable news gabfest show. We don't care what you look like. We don't care who you voted for, who you worship, what you worship, who you love. It doesn't matter if your dad left you millions when he died or if you knew who your father was. We have been honed into a machine of lethal moving parts that you would be wise to avoid if you know what's good for you. We will not be intimidated. We will not back down. We've seen war. We don't want war. But if you want war with the United States of America, there's one thing I can promise you, so help me God. Someone else will raise your sons and daughters.
Military Broadcast Radio, the station that's giving veterans a voice.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Find us on the web at mbradio.us.
Join Terry with Tracer Rounds every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern to hear interviews with veteran artists, veteran business owners, and businesses that support veterans. Catch us on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, and MB Radio. If you miss a show, you can listen again on Wreaths Across America Radio every Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. Tune in to see if you are on target. MBR, giving veterans a voice.
And you're on Military Broadcast Radio, and this is the Tracer Rounds podcast. And my guest tonight is retired Navy Commander Henry Rausch. Welcome, Henry. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very good. Thank you very much, Terry, for having me.
I'm really excited to have you. I got the book today, and so I kind of was paging through it. I haven't read it, so I can't say that I know exactly what it's about, but I know it's about submariners. I know that much.
Yeah, and we call them submariners just because we don't like to be considered sub to anything, really. So
Submariners. Got it. Okay. Thank you for that correction. I appreciate it. So can you tell us a little bit about your military service, like why you decided on the Navy and maybe how old you were when you joined up and just some facts around your service, if you don't mind?
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I've got maybe a little bit of non-standard acquisition. I grew up in a Navy family. My dad was a career Navy man. He was a Master Chief. He spent 30 some odd years in the Navy.
Oh, wow.
He was a corpsman with the Marine Corps in Vietnam. He came back really affected by that, and I talk about that in one of my books. I was the first fellow in my family to attend college. We didn't have a lot of money when we grew up. We went hungry a lot at the end of the month when the paycheck ran out. I studied really hard. I got a full scholarship to Stanford University.
Wow.
I planned on being a doctor, a physician. And one of the good things about Stanford is they have a lot of opportunity, and I was able to work in the Stanford Medical Center, and I worked for a doctor. I did all kinds of stuff, and I realized that I make a lousy doctor. I wasn't interested. I mean, it's good to know that,
Right.
to be aware. And I just realized that it wasn't for me. So my junior year, I had a very high GPA because you have to be pre-med, and I had a degree in chemistry, which is very technical, and no interest whatsoever being a doctor. So this was the early 80s when, for your viewers, probably not a lot of people know, it was kind of like the last gasp of the Cold War. Ronald Reagan had become president, and he made a lot of truculent things he said, and a lot of intransigent things and saber rattling, and the Cold War kind of threatened to go hot a lot in the 80s, and he was building up the Navy to 600 ships.
Wow.
And part of that was they wanted to build 100 Fast Attack submarines in the Navy, and they needed to staff up the officer corps to do that. In order to do that, they started, normally the acquisition profile is either the service academies, like the Naval Academy, the Military Academy, or ROTC, and they started up a third one. They got people directly out of college, like myself, who knew nothing. I mean, I knew kind of from my dad, but I knew nothing about the military, and sent us to OCS, and basically made us a deal. About 2 years of training in OCS, and a year of nuclear power training, submarine school, and then we had to serve on a submarine for 3 years. So that's what I did. And I talk about in the book, I don't know why I did it. It seemed like a good idea at the time. I don't regret it whatsoever. It really really matured me a lot. I talk about in the book. The book's kind of there's a lot of things, but one of the things is kind of a boy to man story about me, like kind of learning that as it happens, the world does not revolve around me. So it was a good experience.
Yeah, I think the military does teach us that it's bigger than us as an individual. It's the collective, and so we have to stop thinking about me and I and what I want, and it's what the group needs or what the mission is. So I agree with you on that for sure. So how is it serving on a sub? I've always wondered. I went on the Batfish. It's in Tahlequah, Oklahoma, and it's very small inside. Because it's a smaller sub. I don't really know the different sizes, but in my opinion, it would be one of the smaller ones. And
it is one of the smaller ones, Terry. Yeah. So I have to fess up. So it's on a nuclear. So basically, everybody 50s, 60s on. We're on nuclear submarines. They're much larger, much nicer than. So that's one of the first. I wrote the book for a lot of reasons. One of which was because people didn't know a lot about it. But the one thing I always have to fess up. It's not Dust boat. It's not like living on a diesel boat where you don't get to shower for 80 days or whatever. Those men made a different stuff. I got to tell you, we had more room on a nuclear boat. We got we had an evaporator made 8,000 gallons of water a day. Most of that went to the drinking plant, but we got to shower every day, very short showers. But it's really so. I have to fess up. It's nothing like the Batfish. The one you're familiar with. There was a nuclear ship in our squadron actually called the Batfish. But to answer your question, being on a submarine, I tell a lot of people, first of all, it's very much more isolating than even space travel. Everyone thinks astronauts are gone, whatever. They're not. They're not really. These astronauts go to the space station. They talk to their wives every day. They have emails. They're not isolated. They talk on ham radio. There's one Canadian astronaut who gives YouTube videos. They're not isolated in any meaning of the term whatsoever. We were very isolated. We would go on these missions about 90 days. So about 90 days was the limit because we run out of food after that. So there'd be about 90-day missions. We didn't communicate with anybody because if we did, we'd give our position away. That'd be very bad for us. A lot of bad things would happen if we'd ever tried to transmit because we credited the Soviets with very good geolocation capabilities. You get messages, but the physics of it is such that all our missions were above 65 degrees north in the North Atlantic, the North Pole. I went to the North Pole once. We did 2 missions in the North Atlantic, Barents Sea area. That's all above 65 degrees north. The satellites don't work up there, so there's no high-speed communications whatsoever. So we had something called VLF, very low frequency, that transmitted very low frequency and very slow data rate, about a little bit slower than you can type to get an idea. And we copy that a couple times a day. We get about a dozen pages a day. So you had no idea what was going on. I tell people it's like being in a coma. And it's very much like being in a coma because you have no contact with the outside world whatsoever. Basically the broadcast was limited to operational traffic. And so you come back after 3 months and always it's like, what is it now? It's November, right? So, imagine, going into a coma in August, and everything that's happened since August. You had no idea whatsoever. And, that affected you the rest of your life, right? Like years later, you'd be watching a movie. Yeah, I'd never seen this movie. Yeah, it came out. How did you not see it? It was big because you were in a coma then. You were gone.
Right.
So that's the one thing. It's extremely isolating.
So does it, when you're on like a cruise ship, because I just got off one, so I know it's not the same thing. I'm completely good with understanding that. But on a cruise ship, after you get off, you feel like you're still moving with the boat to some degree. Do you feel anything like that when you come off the sub? Do you feel like, is there that same kind of rocking motion underneath the surface? Is it only on the surface where it does that? I'm
Actually,
really
you don't.
not familiar.
No, it's a good question. Actually, you don't, because we would travel hundreds and hundreds of feet below the surface usually, and you can't feel. You could have a full-blown storm and never know it, unless you went to PD in a storm, periscope depth. Sorry, then you would feel it rocking and rolling. But generally, no, it's steady. It's like being on a subway train. It's completely flat and steady. Now, I will say, sometimes we'd have to be on the surface for various reasons. Sometimes, like there's a whole big scheme of what's called water space management, prevention of mutual interference, where we route these blocks of water around to avoid submarines from, colliding with each other. A couple times you might not get the water submerged, so you're stuck on the surface in bad weather. And then it rocks and rolls like a pig, worse than you can imagine, much worse than that cruise ship, because the submarine has like a rounded hull, and you're going back and forth 30 degrees each time. It's kind of sad, actually, because some people join the submarine force because they're seasick, which works out all the time, except when you're stuck on the surface, and then they're sick as a dog.
Oh my goodness. So do you have problems with that? If that's the case, if you have to run at the surface, do you have is like half the crew not well and not able to function? Do you have any kind of like downtime because of that, or what happens in that situation?
That actually, I'll tell you, one time on my second boat, we were stuck on the surface. We couldn't get water submerged in North Sea. And thank the Lord, the skipper brought everybody down from the bridge, because when he came up, basically, and I talk about this in the book, you have very rudimentary stuff up there on the what you would call a conning tower. We call it a sail, but it's the top part of the boat. Mm-hmm. There's like a 1-inch thick plexiglass screen that we would bolt in place. There was we call it the windshield, because it was, and there was also a mast headlight that was like a 1-inch thick rolled steel. And long story short, after the storm had passed, we came back up and came on the bridge, and that 1-inch thick plexiglass had sheared completely off, and the 1-inch steel bent back to 7 degrees. So anybody up there would have been dead. Just not even pass go or collect $200. I think just spectacularly dead. But generally, submarines generally only it's very rare to be on the surface. You generally only go in when you're transiting in and out of a port.
I see. Well, I was wondering about that because I don't know much about that that type of mission set. I know that the destroyers and the aircraft carriers, they all go out, they stay out, and they're more like a cruise ship in that they have stabilizers in them that helps them not rock back and forth, don't they?
Yeah, I think destroyermen would disagree with the idea they're on a cruise ship. It is. Honestly, obviously there's a lot of friendly rivalry between service ship sailors and submariners. We call them targets. They call us bubbleheads, I guess. There's a lot of friendly rivalry, but arguably they do have it. In terms of material comfort, I don't think I'd ever want to be on a service ship, quite honestly, because I think you are a target. But they have a night. We would go on a mission, and just give you an idea. I told you we could stay out for 9 days till we ran out of food, but that was based on we would load up we load up all our storage tanks. That wouldn't be enough, and then throughout the entire ship, we would load one layer of number 10 cans. That's about a foot. Then we'd load a second layer of number 10 cans of food. So we'd have about 4 inches of head space. and we walk over hunched over, halfway through the run until we ate our way down through our food.
Oh
So
my goodness.
it's very cramped. The enlisted people, luckily I was an officer. I had my own rack. E5s and below shared a rack. You had either 2 men to 1 rack or 3 men to 2 rack. And a lot of guys would just curl up on deck plates, they wouldn't even. It was kind of similar to Das Boat a little bit. We had 2 guys living in hammocks in the diesel compartment. They liked it. We had a lot of guys. We just strap a piece of plywood on a torpedo, and they'd sleep on the torpedo. And 2 guys would share that one piece of plywood. So it's kind of rudimentary living conditions.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It doesn't sound like it's a lot of good rest at all.
Well, the other thing is, and I talk about this in the book, you're kind of in a perpetual state of exhaustion. They had this thing, they've changed it now, luckily. They had this thing, 6 hours on, 12 hours off, 18-hour days. But the fact of the matter is, it was kind of like an emperor's is naked kind of thing, where everyone kind of pretended to work, but it didn't work, because your circadian rhythm is 24 hours, right? So, basically you would go like about 30 hours with no sleep, and then you get down for about 6 or 7, and you start all over again. So you're always kind of in a perpetual state of exhaustion.
Yeah, that sounds like it. It doesn't sound like that's too good on your like mental state or your body in recovery or any of that. It sounds like. So do you have a lot of problems when people come back off of a deployment, 90-day deployment? Do they have some like real physical challenges when they come back because they're so exhausted, basically?
Well, recuperation, and I got a lot of funny, stories in the boat. Like there was, the officers, well, everybody has their own place they rejuvenate. We did a couple of runs in the Med. We would refit in a little fortress island, San Stefano, which is off of La Maddalena, which is off of Sardinia, off the west coast of Italy, south of Corsica, and there was a place there called the Rook House. It was leased by the Navy. And I talk about in the book, it was leased by the Navy. It was a rest and recuperation place. If you've ever seen, I don't know, Das Boat, that scene, the beginning scene, the party where everyone's going crazy? That was pretty much a Rook House, I have to admit. We had some insane parties there. It turned out the person they were leasing it from, she was an English expat. Turned out she was a Soviet spy. So, the last time I was there, they had moved the Rook House somewhere else, so we had some there's always ways to recuperate a lot, but yeah, the mission itself is pretty grueling.
Oh, wow. I think we're going to take a quick break, and we'll just play a Reese Across America quick commercial, and then we'll be right back with Henry Rausch.
At Military Broadcast Radio, the goal is to offer a platform for mental health advocacy while connecting the military community through various media platforms. Founded by U.S. Army veteran Joel Hunt, MBR gives a voice to veterans, first responders, and their families through streaming radio, podcasts, video, and outreach events. With its leadership run completely by veterans and hosts of the diverse programming from all branches of service, MBR was created as a response to the silent battles veterans face after service. Military Broadcast Radio is also a Wreaths Across America partner, hosting a $5 backed sponsorship group page. For every veteran's wreath sponsored through the Military Broadcast Radio page, MBR receives $5 back to help support their platforms and outreach. Veteran and first responder stories need to be told and shared. And with your support, MBR can continue to bring together veteran nonprofits, mental health organizations, and government agencies to bridge the gap between veterans and vital resources. To find out more and donate, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org/MBR.
The station where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey, thanks for supporting our channel by watching and listening.
Find us on the web at mbradio.net.
And we're back on the Tracer Rounds podcast, and my guest tonight is Henry Rausch, and he is a retired Navy commander. And we were talking about your book, and your book is called Submerged, and it's actually the little picture or jacket is behind you there on the wall, and I have it right here. And so what prompted you to write the story? I've just read a few pages in, and I'm already very interested and invested in it. So, where did you learn to write, and why did you decide to write this story?
So the answer to the second question first, I wrote this story, and I tell people this a lot. I give tours around the country for three reasons. One, I really realized people didn't know, just like we're talking about, Terry, about kind of like living in a coma for 90 days and walking on your food, eating your way to your food. Nobody had any idea what it was like to serve on a boat, and I wanted to get that out there. I'll give you an example. Like it's kind of funny. So I was reading in the Washington Post the other day. We have these people movers, these little trucks that bring you to the terminal, whatever, and they want to get rid of them, I guess, but there's some kind of twidget professor in the University of Maryland says that, the concentration of carbon dioxide is too bad. It gets up to 2,500 ppm. It's about a 5-minute ride. Okay. So let me tell you something. So we breathe, because of the way our atmospheric control work, we breathe between 5,000 and 7,000 parts per million, not 2,500, 5,000 and 7,000 for 90 days straight. Okay. And, didn't hurt us. I mean, we're crazy, but that's like a pre-existing condition. Right. So anyway, so people have no idea what it's like to be on a submarine, to be cut off, I talk about in the book, it's a bit sad, but like, my wife miscarried one time. I was at sea. I couldn't come home. The second time she gave birth, her life and my son's was in peril. She gave birth very early. It was emergency C-section. They nearly died, on the operating table. I knew none of that because they wouldn't tell me. Just about a month after they were born, they told me, "Oh yeah, your wife's had a kid early." "Oh, don't worry, everything's fine." I knew they were lying, but because they're not going to tell you. So it's a very different experience. Not just for me, not making myself out to be like a victim, but for everybody. You've got a lot of people, men and women now, who are doing this. I think the people don't know. So that's one reason people don't know. Two, I kind of wanted to set it in amber because a lot of things have changed. We have different submarines now, and a lot of things have changed. We have women on submarines right now. The boats themselves are twice as big as the one I served on. Basically, the one I was on was about twice as big as when you're talking about the Badfish, the diesel boat. And now the ones we make now are twice as big as the one I was on. They're way different. They're all automated. They're computerized. Nothing. They don't really have periscopes anymore like we used to have periscopes. They don't have the same. Everything we did was very manual, and now they have all push button machines. So I wanted to set that in amber. Not that I'm the greatest writer, but there was a guy named Richard Henry Dana who went to a good college, Harvard. I don't think Stanford existed yet then, but he went to Harvard. And when he got out, instead of becoming a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, he went to sea on a whaling ship. And this was in 1840, and he went around the Cape Horn. So here's the thing. So he wrote this book called 2 Years Before the Mast. Okay. Mm-hmm. Regardless of what you think of the book, whatever, if you want to know what it was like to be on a sailing ship back in 1840, you read that book. Right. And I set out to write kind of the equivalent of 2 Years Before the Mast for that period, for 1980s submarining. And the other reason I wrote it, I was really dissatisfied with a lot of the biographies I'd read previously that, not calling anybody out, but I read every single submariner biography I get my hands on. And the listed ones are pretty good. Some guys, were kind of browned off about the Navy, whatever. They're still good reads. But every single one read by senior officers, they were all kind of corporate men who kind of drank the Kool-Aid and gave me like kind of a whitewashed. Everything was great. The crew was so patriotic. The crew was so happy to be there. Everyone turned in, and I was like, yeah, that wasn't my experience at all. I wanted to write like a realistic, and that I've got a lot of really nice feedback from submariners that said like I really told it as it is. That really gratifies me. So that's why I wrote it. Those three reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a story about submarines and the people that ran them or were stationed on them. So I'm really interested to read your book because I want to know about that life. Because my ex-father-in-law, he was the one that served on the Batfish, and I heard a little bit from him, but he wasn't a super tall guy. So I'm like, he fit in the tiny little alleyway, in the bunks, because I was like, I don't know how he fit on the bunk because he's a bigger dude, and I was like, "How did he fit on this little cot? It's small." And he goes, "Oh, we shared it." Like, so I got to sleep during the day, and then somebody else took it at night, and I was like, "Oh, and you shared bunks," and it was just so small. I'm really curious to hear more about how that works, and like you said, a lot of with no communication, it's, you're making decisions, life and death, um, potentially, because you don't have some of the information, maybe what's going on around you. You're just going by what you know to be true in the water. Did you ever have an instance where you were like, um, at the Russians or something, and they were like close to you, and you had to do an evasive maneuver, or you had to just stay silent? I mean, you see that in the movies all the time, like, all quiet,
Sure.
turn
Sure, sure,
everything
sure.
off, just stand still for a minute.
Yeah, there's all kinds of movies like that. So here's the thing. So to be able to publish, if you've been on submarines or really been in the military at all, you have to get approval to publish your manuscript. Okay, and there's like everything in the military. One, there's a process, and two, it's an acronym. So the process is called DoD Office of Pre-Publication Security Review, and the acronym is DOPSR, DoD Office of Pre-Publication Security Review. So I had to submit my manuscript to that, and everything I can tell you was what was approved there. Now, we'll tell you, um, I did not get, when I submitted, it took about 2.5 months to get approved, and they did not redact a single operational detail whatsoever.
Wow.
They redacted about a dozen things about the nuclear plant that I put in that I thought were interesting, but actually they're very good editors. Like when you publish a book, you have to get an editor, and they're not inexpensive. And Naval Reactors was the best editor I have because process of editing, if you write N, like you end up with about 0.85 of N because you just take out a lot that's extraneous. And they took out a lot of stuff I put in about the reactor that nobody really can make your eyes bleed to hear about the reactor. You wouldn't care. Your life is better for Naval Reactors taking that stuff out. So to answer your question, in the book, I specifically, and the other thing they say is don't use anybody's names, or if you do, you have to get their permission. So I had to change all the names. I didn't even mention the name of the boat, actually, because I wanted it to be a little more timeless. But I actually don't mention any nationalities. So I don't say we did this or that against the Russians or anything. There's operations in there that I talk about that we got very close to other contacts, we were looking for guys and we got run over by guys, but I never say the nationality because maybe I could have and they would have approved it, but maybe I couldn't and they would have redacted anything. So I'm on safe ground to say what's in the book, which is I did not mention any nationalities. But we did operate in the North Pole, in the Barents Sea, in North Atlantic. So you connect dots, but I didn't say that.
Right. I understand. No problem here. I just was curious, do you just see so many shows, and I know they're movies, but they talk about like all quiet and like trying to like don't drop a pin, don't do anything because they'll hear every little sound. Is it really like that?
It really is like that. I'll tell you a funny story on my second boat. Yeah, so quietness is a coin of a realm in submarining because fundamentally you detect each other based on noise they're making, and these things are engineered so well now to reduce your sound signature that it might be something as simple as somebody dropping a wrench or something. I'll tell you a funny story. I hope this isn't too off color, but it's funny. So my second boat, I was weapons officer, and one of the things I was responsible for was all sonarmen and all sound quieting. And I was upset about something, I don't know. So basically the officers we eat the same food as the enlisted crew does, but we're in a separate mess, a wardroom. And, we're served by crewmen, mess attendants. And I was going off and I was very upset because somebody had made some noise and it was my responsibility because, it's very serious business if you're counterdetected, you make noise. And the gist of it was, I was like, I'm going to take away, maybe I was kind of joking, but I was like, I'm going to, I think somebody had slammed the toilet seat down. And I said, I'm going to take away every single toilet seat off this ship. I'm going to throw it overboard. So long story short, the next day, when you're standing watch as officer to deck, whatever, you have to do a tour of the entire boat and report to the captain, the readiness. Let me tell you something. In the cruise, the cruise has a couple different heads, we call them bathrooms. Every single one, they were taped down. The toilet seats were taped down. You would never, ever get that off in a million years. So the crew had heard me, and they had responded by taping everything down. But no, it's serious. It's serious as a heart attack. Yeah, quietness is a coin of the realm. I talk about in the book, we had these floating decks that floated on, because basically when you submerge, the hull constricts, it gets smaller, and then when you go up, it gets bigger. And so you don't buckle the decks. You have these decks floating on clips that slide. And every time it would slide, it would make noise. And it was my job for them not to make noise. And I wasted barrels and barrels of grease trying to grease these clips so they wouldn't make noise. Because I'd hear about, anytime it made noise, I would hear about it.
Oh my goodness.
It's very serious, because, you don't want to be the guy who failed to do his job and you got torpedoed or something, or got counter-detected, whatever, because you didn't do your job, I mean, that's the other thing, too, on a boat. There's officers listed, but it's 100 men on a boat just trying to live together and do a very difficult job. And you know everybody. There's no secrets on a submarine. You know everybody, and you are all counting on each other. There's no, everything about there. There's, if a guy is like 75% on this, that and you all trust each other and live and die by each other.
I always wondered about that. And so hearing you say that, I mean, I just can't imagine having to be the one that's responsible for every noise on the vessel as you're moving through the water, or you're stationary to avoid being detected or whatever. I can't imagine trying to keep everything quiet. That's a big, huge ask and a big, huge job, I would think. And it would,
they're engineered.
It would give me nightmares.
Well, they have engineered to, speaking of nightmares, but they're engineered to be quiet. I mean, we've got, the United States Navy is bar none, makes the quietest submarines. But then again, we do a lot of work to maintain that. And I talk about in the book, we would go down to AUTEC range, and we'd have these giant, hanging arrays that would listen to us. And they're a couple 100 yards apart, and we drive through at different speeds. That's one of the first memories I remember as a junior officer, trying to drive the submarine through these, kicking it through the goalposts, and going slow is easy, but then we go faster and faster, and the things would just whip by you really quick. And you didn't want to be the guy that ran into one. That would be bad, right? It probably costs a lot of money. So it's very serious business. We take it very seriously, and it's not just one person's job. I mean, if, there's like 1,000 little different things. You have these things are mounted on these big rubber cushions, sound mounts. Well, if you paint over that sound mount, everything in the military you paint, right?
Right.
That would create a sound short, and it would send the sound into the water. So you could obviate, I don't know, $100,000 worth of sound scene by one paint job, right? So we're always looking for that.
Is there a type of person that does better on a sub, do you think? Is there a type? Is there a certain personality? Is there a certain aptitude for being on a sub, would you say? Do they look for certain characteristics or certain things in your personality or in your testing that makes you a better person to be on a sub versus being on a ship or a destroyer, something like that, a carrier?
Yeah, so a lot of stuff to unpack there. So for one thing, I always get asked, I can never be on a boat, I was claustrophobic. Well, if you're claustrophobic, it's all voluntary. You wouldn't volunteer anyway. So
right.
I think that's the first thing. It selects for people that just don't, and it's not anything to be proud of. It's just like, being colorblind or having good eyesight or anything else, the Lord gave you, right?
Right.
You're just not. I'm just not. I could crawl into a tiny little tube, right? You could keep me there for, 8 hours. It wouldn't bother me in the slightest. But other people, after MRI machine, would go crazy, right? So
Right.
that's one thing. The other thing is, as far as the temperament, you are very close to each other, and if you don't have that capability to begin with, you develop it, or maybe seek other places to do. But you have to be able to get along with people, not love them, not be your best buds, but get along with everybody at some level. The other thing too, probably I don't think we have the luxury. It's the standards to become a submariner are really for submarine officers, not to make a big thing of it, it's probably one level below becoming an astronaut. I'm sure pilots think they're kind of elite in a certain way, and that might be true in some levels, but every single submarine officer has to go back to Washington, D.C. and take a battery of tests, and then be interviewed with the Director of Naval Reactors, who is, well, I just missed Rickover. I had McKee in my time, but now I'm not sure who the Director of Naval Reactors is, but every single one, and that's a extremely high bar to pass. I'll give you an idea of how hard it is. I taught at UCLA between my two boats, and I had people volunteer send back. I sent back about 24. One out of that 24 was approved to be a submariner.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's the other thing I want to bring up here. I always thought 100 men on a boat, whatever. Now we have women, and I was talking to somebody else about this. The demographics are such, we cannot afford not to have women, because the standards are so high. I'm not sure we can get enough men to staff up the submarine fleet we need. We need every person that can qualify, because very few people can qualify to be a submariner. So that's probably the biggest thing. And I'm not aware. You'd have to ask somebody else, maybe a psychologist or somebody associated with the problem. I'm not aware of any specific kind of screening that was done. Just the nature of, having to go back and interview with the Director of Naval Reactors and go through this kind of grueling 2-year pipeline of, the submarine school and that and nuclear power that weeds a lot of people out that wouldn't be suitable.
Yeah, that's a long commitment, 2 years to get trained up to do your job. I mean, most people get training 3-4 months and they're ready to hit the job market, hit what they're supposed to be doing. But with, being on a sub and doing that schooling, 2 years is a huge commitment to really learn what you need to do and to be ready for your position. So that would take some perseverance.
Yeah, so to give you an idea, like you've probably flown, if you're in the military, you've probably flown to San Diego, right? Next time you're flying to San Diego, and I talk about this in the book, when you're landing, you look up, there's North Island there. It's got those carriers around North Island, and there's Point Loma has the submarines. Let's say you see like half a dozen submarines out there and say 3 carriers tied up in North Island. You are looking at 12 nuclear reactors, all within 2 miles of downtown San Diego.
Wow.
12 nuclear reactors within 2 miles. How is that possible? How does the state of California, which you all know is kind of, green, whatever you want to say, how would they let 12 reactors be within 2 miles of downtown San Diego? The reason they do is because, the naval nuclear program is bar none, the most excellent program there is here. And that's what you get for that 2 years of training. You get a nuclear program that's bar none to anybody on the planet.
I agree with that. I do. Our Navy is the best. I definitely agree. I couldn't be on a ship or a sub. I don't think that I'm a ground pounder. And I think because I got off the cruise, I was like, yeah, so probably the land is where I need to be. I think I joined the right service. I think the Army was my calling.
Oh, well, my hat's off to you. I mean, tell you the truth, Terry, being in the Army seems like camping with guns to me. I mean, camping is good for like a weekend. I don't think I want to do that any longer now. But then add the guns, it's like, oh my God. So my hat's off to you.
Well, mine's off to you, definitely. We're going to take another quick break, and then we'll be right back with Henry Rausch. Here we go with Joe Muse.
OTAs. Drive our cars, flying planes, take buses, take the trains, walk the beach, ski the slopes, living out our dreams and hopes. We're living, yes, we're living the American dream. We're the American dream. Thank you, soldier, sailor, airman, guardsman, and marine. Thank you all for fighting for our freedom and our dreams. Protecting our Constitution, guarding our homes and towns, defending our shores, seas, and skies, and putting boots on the ground. Some gave all for me and you. We served the red, white, and blue, protecting the American dream. Thanks to you, living the American dream. We're the American dream. The world's become a smaller place, many creeds and one big race, staking our claim to the Creator. We have to find a way for each to still be different but live in peace. Till then, we must protect ourselves, 'cause we're living, yes, we're living the American dream. I'm the American dream. We're the American dream.
The station where our veterans' voices are heard. MBR Talk.
Hey, thanks for supporting our channel by watching and listening.
Find us on the web at mbradio.net.
And we're back on Military Broadcast Radio on the Tracer Rounds podcast. And giving our veterans a voice is Henry Rausch is our veteran tonight. And we're talking about his book, Submerged. And then you have another book out, right?
I do. It's called How to Hotwire an Airplane. It's fictional. It's based on my experiences flying, but it's fictional. It's really, the character in it is kind of based on my dad. It's about a Vietnam vet who has kind of severe PTSD from his experiences in the Vietnam War and is saddled with a lot of guilt, and kind of exercises that guilt and redeems himself. He ends up flying immigrants over border checkpoints in Texas. So that's it might be considered a little bit political, but it's more about like how men deal with like guilt and trauma. So it's like I said, my dad was he was 30 years something Navy vet. He was a corpsman, which is basically like a medic with the Marine Corps in Vietnam from 65 to 67. And he came back and he was, your basic, like real solid fellow up to the point, about my age actually. And then he started really, really breaking down. And if he thought about anything that had happened, and I realized like everything had been bottled up for him in 30 years, and then it just kind of all released at once. And so I kind of wrote it about that, about like how somebody, deals with that. Like, I'm not sure flying immigrants over border checkpoints is the best way to deal with it, but that's what he does in the movie, in the book.
Right. Oh, it could be a movie, right?
I hope so. Netflix, if you're watching this, it'd be a great movie. I'll tell you, you'll never, I'm trying to get into this writing business. I'm writing my third book right now. like there are a lot of very common, it's always werewolves and 14-year-olds, and they have a hot vampire or something. I don't know. This is very different than that.
Right. Aren't you a pilot too?
I am. I've got about 4,000 hours as pilot in command. I bought a plane right after I got out of the active service, and I don't think it's a coincidence. I think that was kind of the only thing that would kind of suffice for driving submarines. They're very similar in a lot of regards, one of which is, you can't be one of these people, oh, I thought I did this, I thought I latched that, whatever. You have to, there's no, oh, I thought that. You're dead. You're just dead 1,000 times over. If it demands absolute attention to detail, and I kind of enjoy that. So yeah, I am. I've flown a lot. I used to fly for rescue. I don't do it anymore. Used to fly for a rescue outfit, Paws and Paws. We'd fly dogs, from kill shelters to people who are adopting them. But it's a lot of fun. Yeah.
So do you just fly for fun now, or do you fly like any kind of like charter of any kind or something like that? Or is it just all fun?
Just for fun. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I use it like for business purposes, but yeah, just private. Yeah. Not professional or anything like that. Yeah.
And so you probably have something maybe the size of a Cessna.
Yeah, it's a Piper. Like there's a little thing like friends don't let friends fly Cessnas. It's a joke, but yeah, it's a Piper. It's a Piper PA-38, but it's same size. Yeah, it's a low wing thing.
So those planes, they tend to kind of rock like a boat does when there's a lot of turbulence. And so those could make people kind of like not feel so good as well if they're not steady with motion and rocking and all that. So do you find that people that you take up in the plane, some of them go, oh my goodness, I wasn't expecting an amusement ride. I was just expecting a plane ride.
No, I got to admit, I've had a couple of people throw up in my plane, yeah, which is a pain because you got to wash it out. But yeah, and I don't think it's anything. I said this earlier. I don't think it's anything to be proud of. It's Lord gave you the ability to deal with motion sickness or not. So it's nothing to be. Oh, I don't get motions. It's nothing to be proud of. But I don't. I can get rocked around like a big dog. But yeah, I've had a couple of people throw up in that plane. Yeah, because you did get rocked around a good deal when there's turbulence. Absolutely. It's a lot more than being on like a airline or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. My uncle is also a amateur pilot, and he took me up, and I didn't have problems with it, but I could definitely tell I was in a smaller aircraft, and it kind of did the rocking thing because the winds were kind of, I don't know how many knots they were blowing, but it was a little rocky and a little rough. And I was like, oh goodness. And I was like, I'm glad that I'm able to handle this, but I can just imagine somebody that's not good with that kind of motion, not doing so well in that environment. So what are you said, what are you writing next? You said you're writing another book, and it's going to be about what?
Yeah, I am. So the working title, well, I like to call it Google Maps Handicap, but I don't think I can because lawyerly stuff. So I'm going to make up a name for Google. But basically, it's about two lunkheads that invent this app. Like, like when you use Google Maps and it tells you you're going wherever, I don't know, pizza place, whatever, it tells you when you get there, right?
Right.
So that's basically your handicap is what I'm saying. So it's a racing app where people try to beat their handicap and beat their time. And it kind of becomes kind of like a Fight Club for soccer moms because everyone can do it. And all of a sudden the whole nation is doing this app and racing, and it gets involved with crypto and credit default swaps. And before you know it, there's going to be a big race that's going to destroy the world economy. So the United States has to turn off all the GPS satellites. So that's the story.
Oh man, that sounds pretty involved. I can't wait to read it.
Well, one thing while I was thinking about it, you said, was it your grandfather or your father was on Badfish?
It was my ex-father-in-law. He was in the Navy and he served on the Batfish, and he lives in Oklahoma, and the Batfish is in Tahlequah, Oklahoma.
Mhm.
And so it's dry docked, and it's a museum where you can walk through it. So I decided, well, why not go? Because, he served on it and I could kind of see maybe something, like kind of maybe understand what he did in service. And I was like, man, this is small. Like, I don't know how tall guys do in this environment.
Well, I'll tell you what he did. So the Batfish was one of the submarines that served in World War II. It was a diesel boat that brought the fight to the Japanese. I talk about this in my book, in Submerged. The submarine force comprised 2% of the U.S. Navy. It sank 55% of the Japanese shipping sank in World War II. So 2% of the Navy sank 55% of the shipping. And they paid a horrible price for that. The submarine force was the number one force, not in total numbers, but in percentage of fatalities. So that just shows men like your father-in-law and the men that served with them on ships like the Batfish. We just owe a tremendous debt to, they had the highest mortality, higher than any other planes, whatever. When, they only, what is that? 78% came back from those missions. And like I said, they 2% of the Navy, sank 55% of the Japanese shipping. So we owe a real, and I talk about that in the book, we owe a real debt of gratitude to them.
Yeah, definitely. I had no idea. I mean, that's impressive.
That's why I wrote the book. Like I told you, people don't understand, and I wanted to put that out there and put that out in the book, and I think we're in a similar situation now. Admiral Nimitz, after Pearl Harbor, he said that submarines were the only force he had to take the fight to the enemy after Pearl Harbor when they're trying to rebuild the fleet. And we're kind of like that in there now a little bit with it. There's China has these hypersonic missiles that will, just take out a carrier like nobody's business. There's no real way to defend against something going, Mach 6 or 7. And so all the service ships have to stay away about, the longest range we credit now is 1,200 miles right around Guam. They can't, in a shooting war, they couldn't go west of that line without being subject to these hypersonic missiles. And the only thing we have in the nation that can take the fight to the enemy are submarines. And so we're kind of back in that position after Pearl Harbor, where submarines are the only, and so I bring the discussion full around. It's men and women serving, but it's not a whole lot. Any given time in the pack, you might have 7 or 8 submarines on station. That's it. That's the thin line, protecting us right now. We got about 50 altogether. It kind of varies depending on what's getting decommissioned or commissioned. But of those 50, 20 are in the pack, 30 are in the land. Of that 20, about maybe 8 are on station at a given time. You got 150 men and women on board a boat, right? So you're talking, 8 times 150, maybe 1,000, 1,200 people are defending us, and they're on the line right there. I mean, we owe the people like your ex-father-in-law a debt of gratitude, and we owe those men and women right now on those boats a real debt of gratitude.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, to hear and understand the gravity of what they do and to know that they're the ones that are on the front lines, basically protecting the nation, it's just hard to fathom, and it's amazing. Yeah, we definitely do owe a debt of gratitude to you and what you've done, and then to what the ones that are serving now are doing, certainly.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure how much I'm owed, but I really like to get the message out, and I've been very gratified. I've gotten a lot of almost hilarious, really gratifying emails and reviews from people. People tell me like I told it like it is. One guy told me it was like better than Run Silent, Run Deep. One guy, one of my favorites, he said, I'm sad I finished a book. I walk by the book every day on my bookshelf and just look at it from time to time.
Right. Will there be a sequel to the book? Like, will you talk about something else in your service? Will there be another one to Submerged, or you think that's the end of that story?
The only caveat to that is I did publish on my website, which is henryrausch.com. I published a couple chapters that I had taken out due to space limitations, and I just got some feedback. Actually, somebody told me, I should have kept in that one chapter because it's really good background. It talks about that whole kind of thing that was going on in the 80s. 80s were kind of there's always this sense about history that you look back, you watch it on a Discovery Channel, History Channel, and you think it's inevitable. But when you're living it, it's not inevitable. And it was kind of a scary time in the 80s. We had the Cal 007 shoot down, the Korean airliner that was shot down by the Soviets. We had a lot of scary things that brought us very close to nuclear war. We had something called Able Archer, which was just a standard NATO exercise, but the reigning gerontocracy at the time in the Soviet Politburo thought it was a precept for a nuclear war, and they're all ready to launch. And the thing that saved us, there was a mole, actually, a spy in the Soviets that told the English, actually, like, these guys are ready to launch a counterstrike. And that's something you don't know, we know about now. We didn't know about then in 83 when it was happening. It's been called the closest we've ever came to nuclear war after the October 1962 missile crisis. There was another time, I forget when it was, it might have been 87. The electronics goofed up, and it looked like to the Soviets that were launching a big strike against them. And there was a lieutenant colonel in charge of the missiles that day, and Petrov, I think his name is, and he says, I don't think it is. And he decided not, of his own accord, completely legally, he decided not to launch. Well, he's been credited as a person that saved the most lives, the single person that saved the most lives in history, because he was supposed to launch a counterstrike against us, but it was just the electronic gizmos. My larger point is that there was a lot of stuff going on. It was very much a sense we're at the Wolf store then during the 80s.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciated our conversation tonight, but is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to talk about, or any parting words you want to give to the audience before we get off the air tonight?
Well, let's see. I think I got everything I wanted to. I just want to thank you, Terry, for your opportunity to talk and hopefully, read my books, and I hope you enjoy them. And
Absolutely.
It's not just the submariners. I didn't want to come across totally parochial. Just when you go to bed at night, I think Winston Churchill said it best. We sleep soundly at night because there's rough men and now, rough women that are ready to do violence on our behalf that keep us safe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I like that quote. I hate that that's the reality, but that's the reality, is there's people willing to stand in the gap and be that person that stands up for others. And so we appreciate what you've done in the service of the submariners of your time and the submariners that are in the hopper now, or in everybody that's serving currently, because without them, we wouldn't have the freedoms we have, because they're standing in the way of us being overtaken or something along that line. So we appreciate all of the ones that are serving and have served, because you set the bar. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for the opportunity to talk.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was Henry Rausch, and his book is Submerged. So get that today. You can order it on Amazon. I put the link up, and if anybody needs a link, let me know. But I really appreciate the conversation, and I thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. This is Trace Around signing off.
Justice Jackson, they captured Herman Goring alive.
Tell me about him.
He's the face of the Nazis. I'm going to put Goering on trial.
Never escapes the hangman's noose. Very sure of yourself.
No man has ever beaten me.
Goering has to fall.
You don't just have to win, you have to be flawless.
You're walking into a trap.
Knowing what we know now, would you still follow Adolf Hitler?
Nuremberg, Rated PG-13. Now playing only in theaters.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.